And I wish that I could get this thing from my mom. Really cool.
That we should have been just sitting there.
So I'm so good to last Wednesday night service on 2023 and 2023 this is the night for that. So I'm so glad again that you're here. I want to just mention too that we are starting home Sunday at breakfast. So go home and brunch. We're doing 9:30 service for brunch afterwards. And Monday, Thursday, 7 o'clock service next week. Good Friday. 7 o'clock again, and Monday, Christopher Feast of Sunrise, 7:30 to Sunday, and again 9:30. Looking forward to this very special sort of week. we have. So for tonight, you will need a songbook, the whole evening prayer songbook. So 3 years enough for us this week, and the outline that looks like this of the evening. And on the back of that is the song lyrics that you need for during August and sing it. Jesus Christ, you are the light of the world. Stay with us now for eternity. Star of night, make us shine with gentle justice, let us each reflect your light. Mighty God of all creation, gentle Christ who lights our way, loving Spirit of salvation, lead us on to endless day. May God be with you all, and also with you. Let us sing our thanks to God. It is right to give God thanks and praise. Blessed are you, Creator of the universe. From whom you have liberty, my life and faith. May the light of your Christ make our darkness bright. For your word and your presence are the light of our pathways, and you are the light and life of all creation. Bethany will join us. She will lead group 2. I'll lead the congregation in group 1. So the choir will do group 2 and Bethany will lead it. Rise up like incense before you, lifting up my hands as an offering to you. Oh God, I call to you. Oh God, oh Lord, to me now. Within me, God, even my heart. Rise up, like incense before you, going up of my hands, as an offering to you. All praise to God, creation of God, all praises of Christ, praise be to Christ and the Spirit of God. Rise up, like incense before you, lifting up of my hands, as an offering to you. May our prayers come before you, O God, as incense, and may your presence surround and fill us, so that in union with all creation, we might sing your praise and your love in our lives. Our reading for tonight comes from the book of John. This is chapter 11, verses 1 through 7, and then 17 through 27. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Lazarus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Upon his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Martha, do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one to come into the world. This is the end.
You are looking at a dead man. That's right. You've never seen a dead man speak, have you? Or maybe you have seen someone die, perhaps seen a dead body at a funeral, but you've never seen someone who was dead for 4 days, alive, talking, and walking around. Yes, I am Lazarus, the man Jesus raised from the dead. My sisters Mary and Martha and I occupy a rather prominent place in the gospel story. Perhaps even more prominent than you know. I'm not sure just exactly how my family and Jesus became so close. We had known Joseph and Mary, and our families had been together through the years. I guess we just became close through all that contact. So maybe it was only natural that when Jesus began his public ministry, our home became his home. You know, Jesus never had a home of his own once he left Nazareth. In fact, I remember one time when someone wanted to follow him. He said, foxes have holes and birds have air in the nest, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He had no home of his own, but he knew he was always welcome in our home. And he and his disciples spent many nights as our guests. It was a place for Jesus to get away. As more and more people came to know him, it seemed he never had time for himself. Someone was always wanting something, people pressing on him from every side. And when he came to our house, he could relax, at least for a little while. I wish I could tell you what it was like to be the friend of Jesus. He was an unbelievable person. Oh, I know he was the Messiah, the Son of God. I guess we knew that, and we believed it. After all, his mother Mary had told us the circumstances of his birth, and we had witnessed him perform many miracles. But I guess we didn't think of him that way. He was just Jesus, a friend, a best friend anyone could have. Whenever he would visit, he would always pitch in and help around the house. He was a carpenter, you know, and so if anything needed fixing, he just did it. We were always fascinated by his interpretations of scripture. It was as though he could take the most complicated things and make them simple. Things I could never understand suddenly became crystal clear. When he came to our house, even with crowds sometimes waiting outside, he brought a peace that I just can't explain. Well, I suppose you're eager to hear what happened to me. To tell you the truth, most of what I can tell you comes from Martha and Mary, my sisters. They were the ones who later told me all that had happened. The only thing I remember about anything is being sick. It started with a fever, and I was very weak. I told Mary I was going to lie down, told her about the fever. She got a cold towel, put it on my head. It felt so good. I know I lay there for several days, and the fever just wouldn't seem to go away. They tell me that I was often delirious. Can't remember the look on their faces and sensing their concerned looks that made my condition was that serious. I heard them talking about calling for Jesus. I know that they were thinking, we'd all seen Jesus cure so many diseases and illnesses. Surely he would be able to help me. As I said, that is all I remember. For it was shortly after that time that I died. If you had asked me even before I died what would happen, I could have told you, because funerals in that part of the country were pretty much all alike. Some years ago, people would go to all sorts of extremes at funerals. The dead person was anointed with the most costly spices and are often buried with prized possessions and all sorts of other material goods. Why one family would try to outdo the other in extravagant funerals? Gamaliel, the great rabbi, came along saying he wanted only the simplest ceremony for his death. And little by little, people began to change funerals to become more simple. Bodies were dressed in a long linen cloth. The Hebrew word for it translated into traveling dress. Quite appropriate, don't you think? Then hands and feet were wrapped in burial bandages. I also knew that I would be buried in a family burial cave not far from where I lived. The hot climate meant that burial often took place the day of death, because bodies would begin to decay quickly in the hot sun. So I knew that one day I would be buried this way. Mary and Martha told me exactly what happened, and I was buried just as I described. What I could not know is what would happen next. Mary and Martha had sent word to Jesus that I was sick, thinking he would come running. But he didn't. In fact, it was several days before he came. By that time, I had been dead for 4 days. Martha said she heard that Jesus was coming and went out to the road to meet him. She feels bad about it now, but at the time she was angry that Jesus had taken so long. She blurted out, "Lord, if you had been here, Lazarus would not have died." After they talked, she went to get Mary, and Mary said she told Jesus the same thing. They both said Jesus spent quite a bit of time with them there on the road. Jesus never did come to the house, not at least right away. They told me that Jesus was quite broken up, and he wept openly. He asked them to be taken to the tomb. When they got there, I guess he asked for the stone to be rolled away from the entrance cave, but they told him not to because the stench of death would be too great. Everyone thought he just wanted to have one last look at his friend, I guess. Then I'm told he looked up to God to pray, and after he prayed, he cried out. Here is where my memory comes in perfect. I can't tell you what happened while I was sick or during those 4 days after my death, but I can certainly tell you firsthand what was said. It was as if I was in a deep sleep and I heard the words. They sounded so far away, yet so loud. "Lazarus, come out." I opened my eyes. I didn't know where I was. I felt so weak. It was dark, but a blazing light was coming from somewhere. I sat up, turned my head, saw the light that was coming through the entrance door. I looked around. I saw skeletons lying around me, and I realized where I was. A burial tomb. What was I doing in a burial tomb? Then I started to stand up, and I saw that I was wearing burial clothes, burial bandages, and then it began to dawn on me. I'd been sick, and I had been buried, and I couldn't understand. Had I been buried alive? Or if I were dead, what's happening now? I couldn't understand anything. I walked out of the tomb door, and outside, crowds of people were standing and staring at me. And then I saw him. Jesus was standing with his arms outreached and smiling. People were gasping. I saw one faint on the ground, but soon others were yelling and screaming and clapping their hands and praying and dancing. Some came up to me, patted me on the back. Others stayed back just staring as if they were afraid to get too close. The next thing I knew, they were taking me back to the house. And everyone was talking at once, telling me what had happened, and that I had been dead for no less than 4 days, decaying in a tomb. When Jesus, after praying and called out my name, had raised me from the dead. It all seemed so unbelievable, but then there I was. So who was I to argue? It took me several days to get used to the idea. Mary and Martha told me over and over again what had happened. And I kept asking them to tell me one more time. I couldn't get enough of the story. It was so remarkable. It was the most unbelievable miracle I had ever heard of. I wish I could tell you that life was easier after that. It wasn't. The religious leaders were so upset over what had happened, and in fact the countless Jews were leaving their synagogues to follow Jesus, that they immediately began to plot to kill Jesus. It was no secret to any of us. But that wasn't all. If you're reading your gospel story beyond the account of Jesus raising you from the dead, you'll also read that because there were so many coming to see me, the evidence of the miracle, the religious leaders also began plotting to kill me. They thought if they could get rid of the evidence and then get rid of the miracle worker, everything would go back to normal. Nothing was ever normal again. It was only a short time later that Jesus was arrested. I was there at the foot of the cross when he died. I heard his last words. Nothing you could have done would have gotten me away from Jesus. Not after what he had did. No threats on my life, nothing would keep me from being there for him and doing all that I could. None of us could understand why he had to die. What had he done? Loved people? Healed people? Listened to people? Helped people? Is that the cause for death? No. It was pure fear on the part of the religious leaders. Fear that people would follow Jesus rather than them. When Jesus died, all of the world seemed to collapse. How often in those days I wish he had left me to rot in the tomb rather than raise me to watch him die. But then a couple of days later, we began hearing reports of those who had seen Jesus alive. Many would not believe, but they had not been there when Jesus raised me to life. Anyone who had been at my tomb would know. If Jesus could raise me after 4 days in the tomb, God would and could raise Jesus from the dead. It was a few days later when we saw him. I've never been so glad to see someone. I wish I could tell you everything was easy then. It wasn't. It seemed someone was always plotting my death because I was still the most visible evidence of the man who had the power over death. But no matter how difficult life would get, I could go on. Because perhaps more than anyone else, I had felt the power of Jesus turning death into life.
Light shines in darkness. Shall bear a child, and his name shall be Jesus, the chosen one of God Most High. And Mary said, I am the servant of my God. I live to do your will. My soul proclaims your greatness, O God, and my spirit rejoices in you. You have looked with love on your servant here, and blessed me all my life through. Great and mighty are you, O Holy One. Strong is your kindness evermore. How you favor the weak and lonely one, humbling the proud of God. You have cast the mighty down from their thrones, and uplifted the humble above. You have filled the hungry with wondrous things, and have the wealthy no want. Great and mighty are you, O faithful one. Strong is your justice, strong your love. As you promised to Sarah and Abraham, kindness forevermore. My soul proclaims your greatness, O God, and my spirit rejoices in you. You have looked with love on your servant here, and blessed me all my life through. Now we will offer our first and best to the Lord, and while the offering is being collected, we will sing together our hymn. Words are in the back of the Jesus, company. I'm so glad Jesus lifted me, Satan had me bound. Jesus lifted me, Satan had me bound. Jesus lifted me, singing glory, hallelujah. Jesus lifted me, when I was in trouble. Jesus lifted me, when I was in trouble. Jesus lifted me, when I was in trouble. Jesus lifted me, singing glory, hallelujah. Jesus lifted me. Continue with the prayers and the song dedication. Mercy, hold us in love. Be pleased in peace, we pray to you. God of mercy, hold us in love. For peace and salvation, we pray to you. God of mercy, hold us in love. For peace between nations, for peace between people. God of mercy, hold us in love. For us who are gathered to worship and praise you. God of mercy, hold us in love. For all of your servants who live on your gospel. God of mercy, hold us in love. For those who love and justice might guide them. God of mercy, hold us in love. For all those who labor in service to others. God of mercy, hold us in love. And whether the nourishes all of creation. God of mercy, hold us in love. Watch over our loved ones and keep us from danger. God of mercy, hold us in love. For all the beloved who rest in your mercy. God of mercy, hold us in love. Help us, comfort us all of our days. Keep us, hold us, gracious God. Great and merciful God, source and ground of all goodness and life, give to your people the peace that passes all understanding and the will to live your gospel of mercy and justice. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. At this time, we will offer our prayers to the Lord and we will light candles and bring them up to the cross and invite you to spend a moment in meditation and prayer or return back to your seats, however you're most comfortable. We invite you now to offer your prayers. The final lesson. Two words, prayers. God, remember us in your love, teach us to pray.
Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us.
Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
Amen.
Bless our God. Praise to you. May God creator bless us and keep us. May Christ be ever light for our lives. May the spirits of love be our lives and rest for all of our days. We go in peace.
Thanks be to God.
Okay, so we just put your. I just was sitting there. I went, there's a chair.